Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How is everybody doing out there on this November 23rd of 2022? Yes, if you are an astute listener, we are recording this on Thanksgiving Eve. So I want to first give a nice shout out to everyone. Have a happy Turkey Day. Be safe tonight. If you are going out, tonight is a big night to go out. Be responsible. Don't be an idiot. And don't fight any leftist losers because, they're all out there and they're going to be angry people. But before we get into anything fun, please give us a like, share, follow, subscribe, give us 5 stars on Spotify, iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go find us on the socials at the Alex Cuesta Show. Dave, hi.
Hello.
What's
Hi.
going on with you, kind sir?
I'm looking at way too many sales. That's what's happening with me. Going with having to get Christmas gifts and just looking at things in general, it's an issue, and I'm afraid for my wallet right now.
Yeah, you've sparked me because you were talking about Crystal Palace had a Black Friday sale going on, which is your favorite EPL team. And I decided to go look up Man City sales, and I regret that because now my kids aren't going to get gifts this year. So they might be screwed. But overall, no, everything's going well. I'm actually really pumped this week, but I have to shout out last week's show first because last week we had a really good show. If you're a content creator and you have not listened to last week's show yet, then you might be getting left behind. We had Bobby Umar, keynote speaker, inspirational, motivational speaker, 5-time TEDx speaker, and he just really gave us an insight onto his journey and a lot of really good and helpful tips on how to grow your audience. And honestly, Dave, the most I got out of it was just grind your ass off, work harder than you think you can, and you will be successful. Honestly, so definitely go listen to that.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And this week, we also have a guest on that is a lot of fun. Someone who I have a lot of admiration for because they're stepping up to the plate when, we are in a current battle, an ideological battle, and one that is probably harder to fight than any physical battle because it's a battle of thoughts. And right now, the side that I think all three of us share a belief in has been on the back foot, and we've been losing for over 30 years. They have gone, the people with gender ideology, queer ideology, critical theories have infiltrated higher education, and now we're starting to see the effects of it trickling down into our secondary schooling, primary schooling, that's high school, middle school, elementary school. But we're really fortunate that we have people that are willing to stand up and put their necks on the line and use Twitter, which is a powerful source to get information out. And we have someone who created a Twitter profile that does a fantastic job. I want to introduce everyone to Inside the Classroom, the Indoctrination Bird Dog, who is doing a fantastic job putting up videos exposing people in the classroom that are pushing gender and queer ideology upon kids. What is going on, my man?
Not a whole lot. I'm grateful to be with you guys tonight.
Certainly grateful to have you on. And, you are someone, and we're Dave and I are committed to this cause. We had on Billboard Chris a few months ago. We're having you on, and we are firmly in the corner of what I think we all kind of share about the abuse that is going on with kids in classrooms and how it needs to stop, very much so. And I just want to ask you because, right now you're choosing to remain anonymous, and I'm fine with that because I think it's important that we keep people like you protected, that you don't get doxxed, that you have the ability. We see what's going on with Libs of TikTok, and her name got out there, and she is fighting constant battles right now. So I think it's important. And I have to ask you right now, because this is a big deal. What made you start up Inside the Classroom? What did you see that made you say, hey, I have to step up and do this? Because it's not easy to do what you're doing.
So, for me personally, it was, I saw what Libs of TikTok was doing on, social media and the stories that she covered. And I come from a very conservative area where, obviously, no area is immune to this gender ideology and this critical race theory being pushed onto children. No area is immune from that. However, it is not near as invasive here yet. And so when I would see things being posted on Twitter and on social media, at first I thought it was a bit of a, conservatives kind of blowing it out of proportion to a degree. And then when I started digging into it a little bit more, because I went into education, and as I started to dig into it a bit more, I realized actually how bad this is, and that it isn't just conservatives bringing up some conspiracy theory. I wished it was. That would be great. Yeah. That would make my life a lot easier. I could just go on about my day without having to worry about this. However, that's not the case. And as I started to go down the different rabbit holes, I realized how widespread it is, that it's not just an issue that we see, what's on social media. Like what you see on social media is only just a glimpse of what is actually happening. And so, I have young children. And so as I watched what they're doing to children, and the emotional manipulation that they use to push this stuff onto children, and then to use children as pawns in this ideological war and political war, I had to step up and I had to start, exposing, because I can't just sit back and watch this happen to any child.
Yeah. And
if I'm able to help just one child avoid this and be rescued from it, then I feel like I was a success. Ultimately, I want to be able to enact change and bring awareness.
So, what's interesting, outside of people like yourself and, Billboard Chris and even Libs of TikTok, I first started really getting turned on to this, and I think Dave will share the sentiment, by James Lindsay and the work that James Lindsay did and New Discourses. And, I read Cynical Theories, and I've been following New Discourses and a lot of the podcasts that James does. And he was the first one to really open up my eyes to a lot of it. When I first discovered James, he was a fun Twitter troll, smart guy, really went at the left. And then the more I listened to him and I heard, he's like, no. I'm not on the right. I hate you guys too. I'm just someone that sees how screwed up everything is and how far the left has gone. And basically that the right is still crazy, but at least they're crazy with principles. They remain the same crazy. I can side with people who remain the same crazy and have some sort of moral ground. And, and James is someone that kind of opened my eyes to it too, because he's a guy that openly says, hey, I voted for Barack Obama twice. I would do it again. And anyone that has, he still considers himself a traditional liberal Democrat. And if there's someone like that out there that is seeing this and we agree with it, then that kind of puts me in a corner of, hey, maybe there is something to this. And I wonder, has James been an influence on you? Have you spoken to James at all about the work that he does and the work that you do?
Yes, James Lindsay is a phenomenal person. I have a lot of respect for him in the work that he's done to uncover the critical race theory, because they'll say critical race theory is not being taught in schools. That's obviously the biggest lie. The actual course, no, the legal course is not being taught in elementary schools. Absolutely not, obviously. But the framework which it uses is absolutely being taught through social emotional learning.
It's always, I find it always crazy when they say like, oh, it's not being taught. That's a law thing. And it's like, okay, so math isn't really being taught because kindergartners aren't learning calculus. Because it's essentially the same thing. If they're not learning the college level version of it, then it's actually not getting taught in those schools. I find it such an asinine argument.
Yeah, it's absolutely stupid. And it's a deflection point. Because it's easy to just say, oh, that's a legal course. It's a very good way to shine it and say, oh, we're not actually using emotional manipulation on your children. Absolutely not, because we would only do that in a legal course. But James Lindsay, I first learned about him through Twitter, and that was after he'd already written, Cynical Theories, and then
Race Marxism.
I can't remember the
Race Marxism was the
red
second
cover.
one.
Yeah.
What's that?
Race Marxism.
Yes, the race Marxism. I knew it had Marxism, and I could see the cover. I could not think of the name, but yeah. And I actually bought those books because I really, I first listened to them through the audiobooks, and then I bought the books.
Mhm.
But I actually met James Lindsay at a conference, and him and I have communicated back and forth,
Awesome.
and I really appreciate what he's done because when you have somebody like him who he has the background from like you said from more moderate Democrat.
Yep.
Who can recognize these issues and then is a very intelligent person.
Yeah.
And is able to break it down in a way that, anybody could understand it. He's incredibly important in this fight. And anybody who can't see that will not be able to actually win the fight because we have to understand what we're up against.
Yeah,
certainly. And I take it back. I didn't hear James on Twitter first. I actually heard him on Glenn Beck first. And it wasn't him. It was when Helen Pluckrose, who is also not on the right, and Peter Boghossian, who might be the only person that would consider right wing, wrote the grievance studies. And that was when they decided to see if they can get absolute bullshit academic, quote unquote, peer reviewed articles published into major educational publications. And lo and behold, they just proved how much of a fraud the whole peer review system is. And I think it also inspired James more to delve into education. And if you've seen James over the last, 5-6 years, you have seen his evolution from trolling academia to holy shit, there's a real problem here. And we are now dealing with unabashed Marxism, where Paulo Freire is running rampant in our education system. And that's the thing. And the thing that, I don't think people understand, many people don't know Paulo Freire, Henry Giroux, all these important people to our education system that have just destroyed it from the inside out. And now, when you do your videos, are you seeing basically exactly what James describes in terms of the influences of those individuals and other people like Herbert Marcuse and all those types of things?
Absolutely. It's quite interesting to see it in real action. And I actually covered a while back a video of a teacher. Well, I think she's a former teacher now, who had explicitly talked about the banking of education and depositing, the different the children should be the ones that are in charge of their education. They actually bring more to it than what they what has been previously thought of.
Yep. Well, it's not teacher and student. It's, teacher, student, and student, teacher. We have to think of it that way, that we're not only the ones teaching, right?
Yep. And the students are the classroom should be student led, and they need to be culturally responsive teaching, which then connects directly to social emotional learning. So all of this is directly followed by what Paulo Freire, taught, and Henry Giroux and the likes, and Karl Marx. Obviously, Karl Marx was where Paulo Freire was inspired, or who inspired Paulo Freire, like the major part of his inspiration. And what I find really interesting is that these teachers, they think they're actually, and this is my theory, they think that they're actually doing what's right because that's what they've been taught.
Yeah.
They've been taught, that we are an oppressive country, we're an oppressive nation, and we need to liberate, that
and
Marxism,
transform,
liberate, and cut against the normative. That's the other one I see a lot.
Yep.
And help to liberate. There's two real main groups that they focus on: African Americans or people of color. They've kind of looped them in now, and Native Americans kind of have also been put into that.
And for people that don't know, people of color is quite literally just colored people reworded. It is
Sure.
the racist ass left that segregated people and had slavery in the South, just doing it again, using it just wordplay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead and finish. Sorry about that.
No, but that's exactly it. And so what's really interesting is the whole framework that they've been taught, the culturally responsive teaching. I'm all for recognizing different cultures and backgrounds in schools.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. As long as it doesn't teach that one group or the other is an oppressor or the oppressed, and each group is recognized at an equal level, not equity, none of that crap, but there's not one group that's held above the other. And
I'll take it almost a step further. I'm okay with acknowledging that one group at one point did something fucked up to another group. Like, that is A-okay to me. If you want to sit there and say, hey, white Europeans, when they saw brown people, really tried to take them over, and we saw it, a lot of Catholics tried to spread Catholicism and push it on people because they saw them as savages. You could teach that because that's a part of proper history, right? But that doesn't have to go into, well, now every single person that is a Catholic, that is a part of Europeans, are bad to this day. I'm like, no, things happened. That's history. We've learned from it. And now we are a better civilization for our faults and learning from them.
Exactly. And the thing with it is, my take on it is it needs to be age appropriate.
Yep.
And accurate history. Because the thing is, and I'm not talking about the true history from the 1619 project either. Obviously that's hyperbole.
We understand.
But it needs to be taught, again, age appropriate, and it needs to be taught in a way that aligns with actual factual history. And, because our country is not without errors in its history.
No country is.
It's just not. No country is.
Yeah.
Because we're a fallen people, but we have to recognize that a preschooler does not need to be told that blacks are oppressed because at one time blacks were oppressed.
So I have to ask you, though, what age is it appropriate for gender queer to be assigned in the classroom?
Is no age? Is that a option? Because no gender queer ideology should be pushed on kids.
Have you read gender queer?
Can teach, and I've said this before, and I think I will get people that will disagree with me on the right. This is my more moderate side coming out on this. I honestly am okay. Say, for example, if my child is in school and they have a teacher who is gay and is married, and the teacher talks about his husband and leaves it at that. It ends there. And they say, oh, my husband. Then, and the reason why I'm okay with this is then it provides the opportunity for my child then to come and talk to me and ask me, what about, why does Mr. Smith say he has a husband? Then I can have that conversation with him. Yeah. I'm not, because everybody's like, oh, well, the right's homophobic. I'm not. But I don't think the teacher should be then saying, oh, yeah, my husband, and then go further into the relationship with their husband. And I would say the same thing about a heterosexual teacher. It has nothing to do with my child's education. It just doesn't.
Nope. No. And, and the thing is, too, and it's people on the right. Most people on the right are in your side. They don't care if they're gay, if they're straight, even if they're trans. It's not a big deal. Live your life. But if you're preaching it, I'm a Christian. I would not want a teacher in there going to a Muslim kid, telling them why it's wrong that they're Muslim and they should follow Christianity. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's not for a teacher to do. They are there to teach their specific curriculum and to answer questions about the curriculum. Now, if questions pop up about certain aspects of their life, they have to gauge whether it's appropriate to talk about that to a kid. And any sane adult should know what's appropriate to talk about to certain age groups. And if you don't have that understanding of what's appropriate to talk to at the age group you're teaching, then you should not be a teacher.
Yep. Leave the classroom. Leave the field. Get out of there.
Go become an activist. Go become an activist. There's plenty of them. Go do that. Don't do it in the classroom.
Yep. I'm all for, if you want to have political activism, you go do you, but leave it away from children. And the problem with their activism, and that's why children are very much vulnerable to this, is they use, like I said earlier, they use emotional manipulation. Children are very sensitive to emotions. And most children, they'll say, oh, well, you got to have social emotional learning because children can't recognize emotions. And I call BS on that.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old, who right now is asleep on my lap, he is able to recognize, like, if I go from being, just normal talking to kind of more quiet, he'll be like, Daddy, why are you sad? Or Daddy, like, and it would be if I was sad, or Daddy, why are you mad at me? Or why are you mad? Yeah. They recognize emotion. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
But so we don't need to use this emotional manipulation on them.
So have you seen in the videos and the research you do, are teachers and educators, administrators taking advantage of COVID-19 to kind of push more of this social emotional learning, this diversity, inclusion, equity, and quote unquote, the importance of it? Because, I've seen some stuff in politics where they flat out have said things like, we could talk about Klaus Schwab. He's definitely a political figure in the World Economic Forum, that COVID-19 makes an unprecedented opportunity to reshape the world and economics and how we see it. With your research, are you seeing that coming out with teachers and administrators saying, hey, we have a chance here to use social emotional learning to really connect with these kids and do all that type of stuff?
Absolutely, I have. What I find really interesting is, so the biggest connection, I guess, that I see is they'll say, well, children are traumatized because of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. Anytime you hear the word traumatized, that's code for social emotional learning needs to be used. And so they'll say children are traumatized. And so we need to help them to be able to get back social and emotionally before we can get them academically. Well, there's two problems with this idea, and I'll go more into where I've been seeing it. But first, who closed the schools?
Yeah,
who closed the schools? Second, the social emotional learning isn't actually going to address that. And there's been webinars that I've watched where they'll hint at this, where now is the time to start really worrying about racial justice and people of color, students of color have been the most affected by the pandemic in learning. Well, that's because you dipwads closed the schools and put them further back than they've already been because of your indoctrination and teaching them that they're oppressed so that they have no desire to actually learn. Mm-hmm. That's been very prevalent. And I'm starting to see more and more of that in some of these webinars and these teacher trainings that I've been watching. And it's really interesting that, that are using this as a way to, again, I'm going to use another Marxist word, to rethink education.
Yep. So we mentioned Freire before, and I'm going to bring him back up because I believe the book was Pedagogy of Education or something like that, where he kind of talked, and he had a whole entire chapter about the social worker. And he was very much in favor of making teachers also act as social workers. Now, Social workers have a place in our society, and a trained social worker could be good at what they do. But there is no way, shape, or form in hell that a teacher who only takes an education background and now has a few seminars in emotions are geared up to do that. Are you finding in a lot of these webinars that they're encouraging teachers to kind of take up more social working aspects?
So the biggest thing that I see with that is they're teaching them that they need to focus on, and this is the term I hear a lot in these webinars, and even just on TikTok videos, is Maslow before Bloom. Because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and their theory is that, children, if they're emotionally not doing well emotionally, they're not going to be able to learn academics, which it does have truth to it.
Yeah.
If you have a child who is actually facing trauma, you're not going to really get to them with academics. There's some different needs that need to be taught, or issues that need to be addressed. But the idea of social emotional learning is the biggest thing that I see that we need to check in on our students. In fact, I actually covered a teacher who she basically talked about how she gives her students, I don't remember if it was weekly, I think it was weekly surveys to check in on them and see how they're doing, which is, that's thoughtful. And it's okay to say, hey, are you doing well? And then to use that information to say, hey, I think you, or, then to go talk to the school counselor and say, hey, this child's struggling. This is something that I've seen. If it were going that direction, I as long as the school counselor was open, that's a different story. But she then says, oh, well, then you can have her students can request a meeting with her and discuss what they're going through. That's not her job.
No,
I'm sorry.
No, no,
it's not. And this is a common thing that they're teaching, that they need to check out on their students and make sure that they're doing well emotionally and socially. Again, not their job. They can check in and say, hey, if there's something academically that you're struggling with, come talk to me. By all means, that's within their the scope of their job. But anything emotionally, they should A, talk to the counselor, B, and then if it's an abuse situation, it should never go back to the parents, obviously. But if otherwise, they should be talking with the parents and saying, hey, your child had mentioned to me this, this situation. Are you aware of this? But that's not what's happening.
Not at all. So for those that don't know, that are listening, they hear us calling out SEL, social emotional learning, or DIE, diversity, inclusion, equity. And that acronym is intentional. You might see it as DEI. We say DIE here because it does kill any chance that your child has an education. But I want to talk about social emotional learning real quick for those that don't know. So the technique of social emotional learning is a legitimate technique that has been used by trained people in the psychological field, doctors of psychology, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. And what it is when they take a child that looks like they have signs of some sort of emotional trauma and they are lacking in learning, and they think that might be the case, they are taken to a legitimate licensed professional and then talked to and spoke to potentially diagnose an anxiety, a depression, some sort of mental illness that they can then get treatment for. What's going on in schools when you see social emotional learning? It is your teachers attempting to diagnose your children and what it is becoming, because they want to raise all of our kids' emotional stability and things like that. It is basically telling these kids that to look for your anxiety, essentially, look for panic attacks, look for your depression. And now we have a generation of kids, and I'm around a lot of kids in my profession. I see a lot of kids in high school and stuff like that. All of them basically tell me that they have some sort of anxiety or depression. And that was never the case growing up. And the thing that they're being robbed of, and I continue to say this, is they're not being told that in puberty, shit's going to get weird. You're going to have weird emotions. You're going to feel a lot of different pressures. You're going to feel happy and then sad within 5 minutes because chemically you are just rearranging. But no, Now we're telling kids that high pressure that you feel in a moment where you think the world is ending, that's anxiety. And that, moment where you feel like you're going to cry and you have no idea why because you're just an emotional teenager, well, that's a panic attack. And if you feel like the world's going to end because people are picking on you, you might be depressed. And to me, it's incredible to see that that's going on and that's acceptable. Now, you wanted to talk about a connection between the schools and gender clinics. What in your research have you seen that there's any connection there? Because it doesn't seem like there should be a connection between education and a place that's pushing gender ideology.
So, oh my gosh, I hate this. When I say I hate these type of people, I use it in, like, I don't use that term very, very regularly, and I use it very loosely. But I don't use it loosely, sorry. But the one particular case, there's two gender clinics that I've really seen this be the case, and that is Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, also known as CHOP, quite fitting. Their gender clinic.
Oh boy.
And Haverford School District in Delaware County in Florida. So you have CHOP, who has been very much in the news, especially recently with Dr. Levine and his role in pushing this onto children and pushing gender affirming care. And so you have that side of it. You've got, they're the ones obviously doing that. Well, Haverford School District, and they're not alone. I've been working with some teachers and parents in that area. There's some other school districts that are involved in this. But they have formed a partnership with not just the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, but their gender clinic.
No boy.
And this was specifically written on their website, on Haverford School District's website. So this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is, I have the evidence to prove it. I have the receipts to prove it. But they also have, the Haverford School District received training from doctors from the gender clinic for the teachers of how to help their quote unquote transgender students.
It's disgusting.
So you have, and what to look for, and how to help these children. So you have a very, very, very clear connection. And then there's another one with Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago, who also has a partnership with Chicago Public Schools. And they have also provided training to Chicago Public Schools.
That's disgusting. It's unnecessary that they're even getting involved with each other.
Exactly. Yep. So then, again, this goes back to the whole, this is a Marxist thing, and I'll explain. So you have these clinics, and these aren't just them deciding to do this. This is being led by the CDC. And the reason why I say this is because you have the CDC, who has connections in these different districts throughout the country, and they are sponsors of certain school districts throughout the country. And their whole objective is to get community or school community healthcare. Like, they want schools to have healthcare providers in the schools. That's the CDC's objective. That is their goal. And so again, it goes, because their whole thing is the holistic child, which anytime you hear holistic, you know that you're dealing with Marxism. And so so you have the CDC, who's training these, or that's kind of trying to put forth this this goal to have, school-based healthcare is what they call it, school-based healthcare clinics. And then these healthcare clinics then will have access to your child without you there.
So I have to ask. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I feel like the most bothersome thing about all of this to me is actually something that you brought up earlier, is the fact that a decent amount of these people genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, because it would be a lot easier to go against this and really prove, not even prove, but just convince a lot of people about, like, if someone was actually genuinely doing this for bad reasons. Like, it's a lot easier to force those people out. But when you're speaking, you have to argue against people that think they're doing everything right for these kids. It makes things so much harder to get them to understand that, like, no, you are actually going down that road to evil, paid with what you think are good intentions. And it's just a frustrating thing to deal with.
So I have to ask, if anyone is listening right now and they might be on the left for whatever reason, someone on the left is listening to the show, knowing our content, but if they are, and they're listening and they're hearing all of us talk and they're going, we hear you, but we don't understand why this is wrong. These kids are trans kids and they just want to have help with transitions, or they're confused with their gender. In your words, from what you've seen, try and explain to somebody on the left, why is this wrong? Why are we so against this?
Well, it's the answer is simple. Children cannot consent to having their bodies altered. They just cannot. The prefrontal cortex, which we use to make decisions and to rationalize things, is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. So absolutely, an 8-year-old cannot consent to being chemically castrated and sterilized through puberty blockers. And for anybody if there's anybody on the left who, or even anybody on the right who's listening to this that doesn't think this is happening, it is. Children's Hospital Philadelphia, CHOP, their gender clinic. I have the video footage and evidence of it where they talk about how they give puberty blockers to children as young as 8 years old, and they chop off the breasts of girls as young as 14. So anybody who's listening to this who might be a little bit, I'm not sure that's actually happening. Oh, it's happening. And it's not just happening at CHOP, I promise you. And so the reason why we are against this is, again, a child cannot consent to that. They do not have the ability to, and a parent should not make that consent for them, because, again, the child doesn't understand what they're doing. And you have cases like Chloe Klo, who is coming out and expressing, and she's not just the only one. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot of them who would speak out, but they're afraid of getting the same slack and treatment that Chloe's gotten. But so you have people who later on in life now recognize, oh, this is something I didn't actually realize I was signing up for. And it's not reversible. They'll say, oh, puberty blockers are reversible. No, they're not.
Nope.
And then the next argument is, well, any children who get onto puberty blockers end up continuing through their gender transition into adulthood. Well, yeah, because you put them on that trajectory.
They're lifelong patients.
Yeah. And so my stance, and most people who, and this isn't just people on the right, like there are people on the left who have the same stance. Children cannot consent. There is zero ability for them to make that consent. And second, it's wrong to chop off the breast of a child and to chemically sterilize and castrate them. You would not give an anorexic patient the prescribed medicine that would cause them to be even more skinny than they already are. You just would not. So why on earth and you wouldn't affirm them in that? Why on earth are we now affirming what used to medically be known as a mental illness? Why are we affirming that?
Gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's the weirdest thing in the world, too, because, we're using the term transgender a lot. It used to be more the term of transsexual, which is more understandable to have that kind of procedure when you're adult if you're transsexual because you legitimately believe you're a different sex. But the argument, at least when it started, was that, okay, gender and sex are very different. You can be multiple genders, but you don't even have to present as the other sex. So the thought that even if a kid wanted to be transgender, that they have to go on puberty blockers and that they have to do this because it would affirm their transgender, it would affirm them being trans, that makes no sense to the original argument. Because you could just actually talk to them about being the other gender, and that would actually do the same thing that you said it would do in the beginning of this.
Well, and their argument to that is that, well, they become dysphoric and they're seeing their bodies makes them feel dysphoria. And so like, and it's like, okay, that's false because a kid would not have even thought about that had you not groomed them to think that, but whatever. And then the other issue is these children, again, don't understand what it means to be of the opposite gender. They cannot because they've only been who they are. And prior to, 2 minutes ago, when children were transgender, that going off of their logic, I'm not actually affirming that. Because the other argument is, well, it's life-saving. Well, then why on earth, up until 2 minutes ago, were children not committing suicide because they were dysphoric? Why?
Yeah. It's a question they refuse to answer. So I got to say one thing. Chloe, if you're listening, I have sent you a message. Reach out. We'd love to have you on the show and talk to you because you're another individual that's extremely brave and has taken an incredible amount of heat for what you have done on social media and the speaking you've done. So we would love to give you more of a platform here. And number two, I want to jump in because you mentioned Dr. Levine. You recently had a little issue with Twitter. You got suspended and didn't have something to do with Dr. Levine?
It absolutely did. Oh, my goodness. So, and I don't know if I sent this to you. I also, Libby Evans also wrote an article about this from the Post Millennial. So if I haven't sent it to you, I'll send it to you. But anyways.
Libby's awesome.
But so a little while ago, I had covered again what was called, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with medical trainings that they'll do for like doctors and whatnot, but they're called grand rounds, and it's where these different doctors will go and they'll have a training basically depending on what they're doing. So Dr. Levine was doing one with Stanford, and he talked about how states are in the way of them butchering children and sterilizing children.
Oh my God.
How dare states protect children within their sovereignty? How dare they?
How dare you?
And so I had tweeted out about that a while ago. Well, then I've been covering, a lot of these issues with the different gender clinics and showing evidence from the doctors from these clinics of what they're doing. And so about 2 weeks ago, I put together a thread of, Dr. Levine and what he thinks, and then showed the grooming experts that he wanted us to listen to and for the states to get out of the way of. And I called him, how dare I do this? I called him Mr. Levine. And so because of that, I got suspended and locked out of my Twitter account until I decided to repent and delete the tweets, which I didn't intentionally actually mean to do. I was trying to go back and see how much longer, because it gave me a time frame of when I'd be locked out and when I'd be back in. And anyways, I ended up accidentally deleting one. I was like, so I was stuck in limbo of, well, you deleted the one, and appealing the second one. So it was like, oh, well, whatever. I've already deleted the one. I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got back on and I just shared the same thing. But yeah, I got locked out of Twitter for calling Dr. Levine Mr. Levine on the same day that the Babylon Bee was reinstated for doing the same
Yep.
for calling him Man of the Year. They got reinstated finally. On that same day, I got locked out of my Twitter account.
So I'm extremely curious because Dr. Levine came from the Navy, and I wonder, do they still call him sir or do they have to call him ma'am now? I'm actually really curious about that, what the protocol is in the military. We know our military is woke now, so I guarantee it is ma'am at this point. So I want to ask you before we get out of here, because, I think what people need to realize is it sounds like we're being extremely tough on the trans community, and we're not. Genuinely, I don't give a shit. I don't think anyone here cares if you are an adult trans individual. That has nothing to do with me, with your personal life at all. And I think a lot of people come at this to the point where they see the issues that a lot of people in the trans community have mental health wise. There's a ton of it. And when you start to add kids into it, people automatically get a little more emotional, get a little more sensitive. And if you're telling people, yeah, there's kids that may be trans, and we really need to start guiding them and helping them so that they have better mental health when they're older, people really fall for that. And I just want to, kind of ask you, where should that line be? Because I think we're all in agreement. Kids can't consent to puberty blockers. Kids should not be getting genital mutilation, which was unacceptable by everyone around the world when we heard that Muslims are doing it to women in Muslim countries, and African nations did it. We've all, gawked and gasped, and, our country, like, how savage, and how here we are doing it to kids. But where is that line of caring for kids that genuinely are curious or maybe truly are having trouble with figuring out what sex they are through puberty? Where's that line between caring for them and guiding them and abusing them?
So my take on it is this, that the line should be loving your child, like as for coming from a parent. Mm-hmm. If I were in this situation, loving your child and loving them for who they are, and helping them to recognize that they may feel different. And, I think a lot of this, especially with children, is because they were groomed to think that way. Because it was this, why are we just having this big epidemic all of a sudden? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, I refuse to affirm that. I'm sorry, especially with the child. I refuse to affirm. Mm-hmm. I will love and I will support my child. But a parent who loves their child, and this is my take on it as a father, should be able to recognize that their child cannot possibly make that type of a decision, especially medically at that age. They do not understand what they're up against and the complete permanence of that type of thing. So my take on it would be, I would help them and I would love them and I'd support them, but I would tell them, this is something past 18, that's something that, I don't agree with it, but it is not something that I will do. Mm-hmm. I will not give consent to a doctor to do that to you while you're a minor. I refuse. And so my take on it is, we have to be loving, and we have to there are emotions that come with this. We have to recognize that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially like, going back to what I talked about earlier, how they use emotional manipulation. And so they really do. But I would much rather focus on other underlying mental health issues, because a lot of times that's what's happening, is you have children who they do have mental health challenges, and there's the puberty side of it that you talked about earlier, like the hormone changes, but then there are mental health issues, which are very, very prominently found in children who, quote unquote, are transgender.
And COVID certainly didn't help our young kids with mental issues. I fully admit that, we can't all place the boom on mental issues. Obviously, the teachers are having an effect on it, but we were certainly going to see a boom in it anyway with what the teachers' unions did to kids regardless. Sorry to cut you off.
Exactly. And so it's important to recognize that there are other things that should be done first, because when thinking about this, from a medical point of view, if a patient has a challenge, you try to do things least invasive. Like you try to go like the least invasive route first. Mm-hmm. So why on earth would we just start suddenly putting them on puberty blockers? That's not the least intrusive. I'm sorry. It's just not. And neither is chopping off the breast. But so we have to recognize that children, do not understand. And so we need to care for them and love them, but we do not have to go along with it.
I think that's a great point of view. And like you said, with the medical standpoint, if someone comes in with the bad break in their leg, you try to save the leg first before you amputate it. You don't automatically look at it and go, well, I really think your leg's useless now. And my medical will do, you'll be much happier if you cut it off. Like, that's not what they do. So that completely is along the line of what you said. And I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on this show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I hope this helps give your followers a bit of insight of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And if I could give just one thing of advice would be to your followers, if you're not involved, please get involved. Be involved in your child's education. Know who is in front of your child. If you can't homeschool them, be involved with who is teaching and know what, and be involved with the curriculum that's being used. But absolutely be involved. And if you have the ability and a platform to speak out against it, please do.
It's great advice, and I find it to be bizarre advice that we have to tell parents to be involved and to know what's going on with their kids in school. Maybe that's because we came from a mother who was very involved and was on top of us growing up in terms of what we were doing all the time. But man, that shouldn't have to be advice for parenting. We're all busy, but know what your kids are doing in school. That is good advice. Dave, do you have anything before we close out?
No, this is a great conversation. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I think it's extremely useful information, especially with how bad things are truly. Because when you say that everything on Twitter is actually small compared to what's happening, usually social media amplifies. It doesn't really undersell, and that's an issue. So it's good to have this information out there. It's good to understand what is happening and how to call it out and at least fight back against it in some way, because this can't be happening to our kids. It'll just ruin a whole generation.
So again, our guest was Inside the Classroom, the Indoctrination Bird Dog, giving receipts and exposing gender and queer ideology being pushed inside of classrooms. Anything that you would like to shout out before we go on? Any plugs, any handles?
I would just say, please follow my work. And if you are in education, if you are a teacher and you're involved with, what's going on and you don't want to risk your job and your career because of the liabilities that would come with it, reach out to me. My email is on my Twitter account. My DMs are open. I will keep you anonymous. I will hold your identity separate. But if you have a tip and of things that are happening, or a parent, if you've had an experience with things that are happening in your school or in your district, reach out to me. Again, you don't have to be, your identity can be kept anonymous, and make sure that this is ended.
Yeah. Again, really appreciate what you're doing. If I could say anything to end out to anyone that's listening is be brave. Be brave. This is the right thing to do. You're on the right side of history if you're defending children and not having their genitals mutilated. I will promise you that. There aren't many guaranteed things in this world, but the one thing I can guarantee is that protecting children, not giving into the Marxist idea that childhood innocence is a myth, and making sure that they're not forced sterilized and that they don't have their genitals mutilated is the right thing to do. So, like I said, you don't have to be like David and I. You don't have to put yourself out there. You could do amazing work and have great reach, just like I Inside the Classroom has. We are happy to keep this individual anonymous because they do amazing work, and they do the work that they do because of how they are. So this has been a great show. This is eye-opening. It's infuriating. These shows always piss me off, but they're necessary. And, we stand with individuals like you, Billboard Chris, James Lindsay, Chloe, anyone, Libs of TikTok, anyone that is fighting against this type of stuff, because truly evil of our time is this stuff. And we need to win against this. And this is where we need to start. Not in Washington, not who we vote for, not even in Herschel Walker, winning in Georgia. It doesn't matter. This is where we need to start. Winning education again, getting our kids back. So really like that. Whoever stayed and listened to this point, really appreciate you. Please give us like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, spread this word of mouth. Follow us on socials at the Alex Cuesta Show. Go follow I Inside the Classroom. Read the receipts, get pissed off, and join us, because we need as many people as we can to win and fight back against this. All right. So everybody, really appreciate you for listening. So long, everybody.